What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Now that SpiderMan No Way Home is out and I reviewed all the Spider-Man movies, it's time to rank all 11 Spider-Man and Venom movies from worst to best. So let me know in the comments before we begin what your ranking of the Spider-Man movies were. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time, and let's jump into the list. In last place is Spider-Man 3, and as a point of reference, I don't dislike this movie, nor do I dislike any of the movies on this list. Now, do I think this was a wasted opportunity? Yes. A lot of the movie's faults stem less from anything wrong Sam Raimi did, and more from the fact that Sony interfered heavily with this, essentially forcing him into including Venom in a very shoehorned-in storyline, causing the movie to continuously halt and switch gears, sidelining characters for way too long. Had they just stuck with Harry and the Sandman as the villains like Raimi intended, this probably would have been just as great as the first two Raimi films, and we probably would have seen more of these get made. But what I will say is, despite its issues, I still think there's enough to enjoy about it. Thomas Hayden Church is great as the Sandman, the Mary Jane subplot is well done, and all the action scenes are just as exciting, even if some of them do suffer from some noticeable green screen. Plus, there's still plenty of that campy humor Sam Raimi's known for injected all throughout this, including most infamously Emo Peter, and that's all enough for me to have a good enough time with this. The parts about it that don't work are very frustrating, but I still find it enjoyable for what it is. At number 10 is Venom, which is far from a perfect movie itself, but it features a much better incarnation of this character than what we got in Spider-Man 3, and that's mainly due to Tom Hardy's great lead performance as both Eddie Brock and Venom himself, and it's clear he's just all in on the fun. This took on a tone that most people were caught off guard by, considering it was advertised as a much darker, grittier take on the character, and it actually turned out to be more of a superhero comedy. So, to be honest, I was totally okay with it, and it makes it mostly an easy watch. Where it does stumble for me, though, are its tonal inconsistencies, with this subplot of Eddie trying to win back his ex-fiancée dipping too much into the melodramatics, along with an underwhelming villain in Riz Ahmed, who is generally reliable, but ultimately feels a bit out of place here. Because of all that, it makes this not an incredible film, but it still works for what it is. At number 9 is The Amazing Spider-Man. The first reboot of the character with Andrew Garfield sees a more grounded take on the character that is competently directed, but at times felt trapped in a box. Because it started from scratch, it unfortunately had to rehash a number of plot points from the first Raimi film that we just got 10 years prior, where we go through the spider bite, Uncle Ben's death, Peter learning how to use his powers, as well as the inclusion of a villain who takes a page right out of the same book as the first two Raimi villains. So whenever it finds itself repeating those elements, it does have this feel of being somewhat by the numbers. But what makes it shine through are its story elements that deviate from the Raimi films, along with two excellent performances from Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, who give this a lot of heart and soul that make it worth the watch. At number 8 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I know this placement's probably going to be the one people will disagree with the most. Now, this one has its fair share of problems as well, as Sony once again interfered and had this set up way too many sequels while still acting as a continuation of the first movie. But while it leads to some pacing issues, including a bloated 2.5-hour runtime, I actually like this just a bit more than the first Amazing Spider-Man. Now that we're past Spider-Man's origins, the film was free to go in some different directions, while still maintaining the essence of what makes Spider-Man compelling, and what we got was something fun, even if a bit too goofy at times. While the designs for Electro and the Harry Osborn Goblin could have been better, I did enjoy Jamie Foxx and Dane DeHaan's performances, plus all the action scenes were very entertaining. The film also doubles down a lot on the character-driven drama, with a lot of wonderful moments between Garfield and Stone, who each bring their A-game once again and lift up a lot of the shoutier material. While it's unfortunate the film, as well as this series, ends on such a downbeat note, at least for now, I do think its problems unfairly overshadow a lot of the good it does, as it makes for an entertaining, if a bit uneven, entry in Spider-Man's filmography. At number 7 is Spider-Man Far From Home. The second MCU film and the epilogue to the Infinity Saga did have a tough act to follow, as it was the very next MCU film right after Avengers Endgame, but it managed to serve as a nice palate cleanser, offering us a cute, funny teen rom-com as Peter tries to get away from his problems while winning over MJ. And when the film focuses on these elements, That's when it's at its best, as the entire cast is as charming as ever, with a lot of great laugh-out-loud moments. Where the film's shaky, though, is the storyline involving Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, who is initially portrayed as a new hero, but is so obviously evil that it almost feels a bit insulting the way the film attempts to hide it and play it off like this huge reveal. And while I understand that this is meant to be a pass the torch film with Peter getting ready to take on a bit more responsibility after the death of Tony Stark, it does make this a bit awkward where at times there's more emphasis placed on Tony rather than Peter himself, with Spider-Man sometimes being a bit sidelined in his own movie by a dead character. But I think once all cards are on the table, that's when the film is truly in its element. The action scenes are some of the most visually stunning in all the MCU. Jake Gyllenhaal gives an enjoyably hammy performance as Mysterio, while the dynamics among all the characters reach their funniest, so it ends on a much stronger note than it began. It's just that the journey getting there can be a bit too frustrating, so that's why it's not a bit higher. At number 6 is Venom, Let There Be Carnage, which takes all the best elements of the first movie and compacts them into a tightly paced, action-packed, fun little blockbuster that delivers exactly on its promise of Venom and Carnage duking it out. While it does have some slightly thin characterization in certain areas, it makes up for it with a lot of solid fight scenes and a laugh-out-loud sense of humor. Woody Harrelson as Carnage is as hammy and scene-chewing as ever, plus the film gets a nice boost from its extensive focus on the bromance between Eddie and Venom, with Tom Hardy turning in 2 hilarious performances once again. If any of the future Venom movies are as fun as this, I feel they'll be an absolute blast. At number 5 is SpiderMan Homecoming, the first solo MCU Spider-Man movie, though not his first actual appearance in the MCU, which offers something of a change of pace for the character, skipping over all the usual beats we got in both the Raimi and Webb films, and instead it focuses on his high school adventures, as well as his relationship with Tony Stark. This take definitely feels more like Spider-Boy, with the film going for a light, breezy feel full of teen rom-com influences, while also highlighting Peter getting comfortable with being a superhero and not dealing with too heavy of consequences for his actions. And while this isn't the typical portrayal of the character, it's actually a breath of fresh air, as it offers us a fun, lighthearted film led by a charismatic performance by Tom Holland, though where it truly shines is the inclusion of Michael Keaton as the Vulture, who is easily one of the best MCU villains to date, with one sequence in particular involving him being one of the most well-done, tensest scenes set within the MCU. While this isn't exactly filled with all the Spider-Man characteristics we know and love, it still offers us a fun time, making for one of my favorite MCU movies. At number 4 is Spider-Man No Way Home, and despite my just saying Homecoming is one of my favorite MCU movies, this manages to top that with easily the most emotional journey for this version of Peter Parker to date. While the film ran the risk of feeling like a gimmick with its inclusion of so many major villains from both the Raimi and Webb films, it actually managed to avoid ever falling into that trap, giving each of them clear motivations and emotional arcs of their own, while also not taking away from Peter's journey. While I just said this version of Peter has felt more like a Spider-Boy, this is the film where he truly feels like Spider-Man, as it moves away from the lighthearted teen feel towards something much more complex and nuanced than we've ever seen from him before, while still adding those doses of humor we've come to enjoy from the MCU. While this contains Tom Holland's finest performance as Peter Parker to date, one also can't forget the knockout performance from Willem Dafoe, who once again proves why the Green Goblin is one of the best comic book movie villains of all time. This is a jam-packed, exciting thrill ride of a movie, and it has me looking forward to whatever's next for Spider-Man in the MCU. At number 3 is Spider-Man 2, often considered one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, and it's not hard to see why, as it once again taps nicely into the themes about taking on such a huge responsibility that was established so well in the first film. This finds this version of Peter Parker at his most vulnerable and relatable, as we truly see the burden of him being Spider-Man taking its toll on all of his loved ones, leading to a lot of great emotional character drama to balance out all the superhero spectacle. While it's not quite as campy as the first film, and at times it can feel even cheesier, it makes up for it with a lot of heart and still plenty of memorably funny moments to go around. Plus, it features one of the greatest comic book movie villains of all time in Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, as well as one of the best fight scenes in a superhero movie with the train sequence. It's just as enthralling today as it was when it was first released, and it remains a staple in the comic book movie genre. At number 2 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the only animated film on this list that stylistically feels like a cross between the 1960s Batman show and the Lego movie, featuring a lot of fast-paced, zippy one-liners and throwaway gags, all done in the style of a comic book, with dialogue being visualized on screen in usually very funny ways. And it is just a blast. This is easily the most inventive of all the movies on this list, with a distinct visual style that also parodies a wide assortment of genres, from anime to film noir to even old old Looney Tunes cartoons. Plus, it's everything a Spider-Man fan could ever want, acting as a loving tribute to the character and the various media portraying him over the years, being filled with plenty of Easter eggs and meta gags that you'll have so much fun looking out for with each successive rewatch. This is a jam-packed, colorful, hilarious superhero comedy and one of the best films of the 2010s. But in first place is Spider-Man, a classic take on the hero's journey that paved the way for the future success of the superhero genre. While the film is certainly a bit cheesy, especially by today's standards, it's also a heartfelt experience that really hones in on the essence of who Spider-Man is, showcasing how relatable his problems can be and how he strives to do better and learn from his mistakes. Everything about this film is nothing short of memorable, from the dialogue to the fight scenes to all the humor. Unlike a lot of other superhero movies that aim for a much more serious take on their respective characters, this goes all in on the campier nature of superheroes, and despite its cheesy nature, it's pretty aware of what it is and wants you to just have as much fun with it as possible while still telling a heartfelt story. While this boasts a memorable cast, one of the highlights is without a doubt Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, who's ridiculous, over the top, and completely out there, but totally commits to the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the character and gives us something that's nothing short of masterful. Not only is this one of the most important comic book movies of all time, but it's still just as entertaining now as it was in 2002, and it comes in as my #1 favorite Spider-Man movie. And that's my ranking of all the Spider-Man movies, and honestly, this may just be one of my favorite movie franchises going. I've always loved Spider-Man as a superhero growing up, and I've always had a lot of nostalgia for the first two Raimi films, and it's amazing how many of these films, through all these different iterations, are like top tier stuff, at least for me. Like, I rated the top 5 movies on here over a 9, and that's just incredible. And considering where things appear to be headed for the character, things seem very promising. At least as far as whatever Marvel has planned. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the Sony universe where they're making standalone movies for like every villain imaginable, but I'm at least excited for where things are headed with the next SpiderVerse movies and the next Tom Holland movies. So that'll be fun. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and considering it looks like we'll have plenty more Spider-Man content on the way soon enough, I look forward to seeing where things go. And in the meantime, let me know, what's your ranking of the Spider-Man movies? Did you agree with this list at all? Did you disagree with it? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.